Sorry, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Edmond Benjamin Adi. I'm with Gamfin, head of training or in charge of training and programs. Today's webinar is hosted by Gamfin and CAPLAS through our partnership with MasterCard Foundation. And the whole idea is to strengthen the financial sector, the non-financial sector that we witness today. The program is called FIRST Plus, which stands for Financial Institutions, Resilience and Strengthening. To tell you a little about FIRST Plus, they are there to see to it that they address common challenges across the industry through webinars like this. They are also to see to workshops and training sections. CAPLAS also provides one-on-one technical assistance to financially solid financial institutions that are committed to scaling MSMEs finance. At the end of the webinar, we'll provide the contact information if you'd like to learn more. And I think that we have to learn more. Today's presenter, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. John Kozowski and Eric Kwao. To tell you a little about Mr. John, John has about 30 years of experience in working with financial cooperatives, microfinance institutions and banks around the world in the MHC and the agriculture sectors. He's a specialist in applying the value chain approach in financing. Eric, who is also his co-facilitator for today's program, is a banking and finance expert with expertise in agricultural value chain financing, enterprise development, and business advisory. Throughout the webinar, we encourage you to submit questions for John and Eric in the chat box. Eric will be moderating the questions and asking them throughout the webinar. As well as at the end, we are recording the webinar also that will make it available through a link so that you can have further information on what we have learned today. So without wasting my time, I hand over to you or to Eric and John to facilitate the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Edmund. Welcome, everybody. Since it's a small group, I can, in alphabetical order, like to greet Binyam, Christopher, Dora, Enoch, Catherine, and Sandra. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today on this webinar. So we have lost a little bit of time. There was a technical issue. Some people could not get in. I think that was to a certain extent solved. I hope you can stay with us. Welcome, Hannah. Thank you. We have a small group, so it will be actually maybe quite enriched. So that as Edmund said, please do submit any questions that you have as we go through the slides on the topic. And Eric will be looking out for them and will interrupt me to ask some of your questions as they're appropriate. So we try not to waste any more time. Let me start. The webinar I'm going to talk to you about today is actually about applying value chain approach to financing. As all good webinars should do, the first thing we should look at, I would like to, is go through the objectives that we've set out for this particular webinar, and so that you can set your expectations accordingly. So the first objective I would like to and hope to achieve here is that we arrive at a common language as to what is agri-finance and what is agricultural value chain finance, what I've noted here as AVCF. So a common language on the concepts and terms, primarily on the concepts and terms in value chain finance. The second objective I would hope to achieve is that to help you determine if you are financing the ag sector, perhaps even unknowingly in your financial institution. The third objective I would like to achieve is hopefully to get us all a clear idea of what value chain finance is all about. I'm trying here to create a common understanding so that we can all be on the same page when we talk about ag financing or ag value chain financing. They are not the same thing. They are completely different to each other. They belong to each other, but they are not the same thing, as we will see a little bit later. So this is what I'm hoping we will all come to agree and have a common language about as we go forward and we begin working with your financial institution, hopefully on implementing value chain financing. Because a lot of times there is a confusion between the two, and I'm hoping to make that clear. And finally, I would like to share with you some basics on how value chain finance is implemented. So I will try to give you a bird's eye overview of how it can be done. Obviously, if your institution, if you become interested in actually implementing value chain finance, there are a lot of things that we can bring to your institution to make that happen. But I just want to, at this point, only give you a quick overview of roughly how it looks so that you can have a sufficient amount of information to decide whether you would like to apply it in your financial institution. Welcome, Alexander, and welcome, Abdul. I'm sorry if you had any trouble getting onto the registration process, but I'm glad you made it, so welcome. We're just starting. So these are the objectives that I'd like to hopefully attain through this webinar. Now, to achieve these objectives, I'm going to cover the following topics. First, I'd like to look at what is a value or supply chain. Sometimes it's known as a supply chain. I think for most of us, this is going to be fairly simple and intuitive, but there may be some surprising elements in it that I would like to bring up that you maybe not all of us have thought about. The second one is I'm going to try to convince you, we're going to try to see examine whether you are actually financing the ag value chain and perhaps don't know it. Then I want to look at what is value chain finance? What does it really mean? And then give you some, as I mentioned, some pointers on how it's implemented. Okay. Eric, just as I go through, I don't think there are any questions at this point, but please do step in if there are any questions. Again, everyone, please, any questions you have, put them in the chat box. Right, so what is a value chain? Well, I think it's fairly plain and simple. Most of us intuitively, if not professionally, know what a value chain is. So it's basically, this is an example of a value chain. It has a start where a commodity is produced, and it goes through a chain of activities until it gets to the end, which is usually the final consumer. In terms of terminology, when we talk about value chains, the downstream direction starts where the production begins of the commodity. So the commodity is basically upstream, like a river, and as it flows through the value chain towards the consumer, it's going downstream. That's just sort of the nomenclature, conventional way of explaining or talking about the value chain. So the opposite direction, of course, obviously is upstream. The definition of a value chain, again, is relatively simple. I'm sure you all know it. It's basically all the processes and actions and actors that occur or are needed in order to get a commodity from production through value addition, if any, to the final market. So basically the same thing as we see here in the picture or the image, which is depicting the fresh milk or the cheese value chain, if you like, from cows to milk to cheese to consumers. In agriculture, very often the value chain is noted or can be described as from farm to fork. So all the processes that are involved from getting something from the farm to the fork, your fork on your table, or if you eat with your fingers, like in many countries we do, from fork to fingers. So the concept is simple. I think we all understand it. But the realities and the dynamics can sometimes be less simple. And so I think there's some of the issues, we'll go a little bit deeper into value chains to understand a little bit more about the dynamics, to see how those things work. Okay, but I think it'll be relatively easy for us to comprehend. Okay, another type of value chain, I'm just going to mention this very briefly because it is becoming more and more a type of value chain which is being touted, if you like, or promoted as the way value chains really should be. It's what is known as the zero waste or sometimes circular economy value chain. So under a circular economy value chain or zero waste concept, this basically means that the value chain doesn't end at the consumer, but from the consumer, the waste product of that commodity, whether it was packaging, usually it's packaging, or maybe it could be part of the commodity itself, is recycled or reused or transformed into something else so that it doesn't create garbage. So the idea here is not to create garbage or to create waste, but to recollect the byproduct or the waste product of the commodity, to use it somehow in another product which doesn't create waste. If you like examples of that, for instance, here in Europe, all our kitchen waste, for instance, if we peel potatoes or peel bananas or peel carrots or other vegetable waste from eating food, we actually throw them into bags which are taken away every week, or is it every 2 weeks, I think, from our home, and it's turned into compost. At large companies collect this food waste from us, and they turn it into compost for later for use in gardening and growing. Another example, which is coming back, when I was younger, it was very common that if you bought a bottle of drink, Coca-Cola or any kind of soda pop, if you bought a bottle, that bottle had an extra price on it. It was called a deposit, and which you would get back if you brought the bottle back to the place where you bought it, or anyone else that's also selling that commodity. And those bottles were collected by the factory that made the product, and they would reuse, they would wash and reuse those bottles. That became less and less popular, especially with plastic containers, and we moved slowly away from a more sustainable recycling type of a society to what I call a throwaway society. We end up throwing away a lot of things rather than reusing them. But this concept of recycling and coming back is coming back into popularity. Okay, so let's look at some of the dynamics and dependencies in a value chain. Now, I usually take a rather unconventional approach to this, so don't be too shocked. Try to use your imagination of what I'm trying to explain and how I'm going to try to explain this to you about value chains. Let's imagine you have a box of something. I think these are either apples, or imagine tomatoes. They could be mangoes. You have a box of mangoes, and you want to get them from Tamale to Accra. Okay, so we have this problem. We need to get our box of vegetables from Tamale to Accra, and for that we can't do it ourselves. So we need a value chain. We need something that's going to help us get this product from where we grew it to our market, right? So imagine we have our value chain looks like this. Okay, now don't be shocked. I use unconventional ways of sharing ideas. So imagine that our value chain looks like this. Okay, now obviously this is a bicycle, right? So what are the elements? What's important here are the parts of the bicycle that make it a useful vehicle for getting our tomatoes or product, vegetable product from Tamale to Accra? What do we have on a bicycle that is critical, that it's necessary for it to be a worthy and useful vehicle for us? Okay, so let's say, for instance, well, there's a seat. The seat is useful because it will make it much easier for us to pedal from Tamale to Accra. We won't have to stand the whole way. So the seat is very useful in that respect. There also happen to be brakes. So the brakes are also useful because otherwise we wouldn't be able to stop if we needed to. Right? So brakes are useful in the value chain. Tires are obviously useful in the value chain. Without the tires, we wouldn't be able to go very far at all. We'd end up pushing the whole thing or carrying it on our heads. The spokes are also obviously an important element in the value chain because without the spokes, the tires wouldn't function properly. They would fall. They would cave in. They would cave in. Another element is the chain and the pedals. Obviously, without chains and pedals on the bicycle, we wouldn't be able to go very easily. We would have to push it. So it would be not a very functional value chain. It would still work, but it maybe wouldn't be as good as if it had a chain and pedals. So now we have a box of vegetables that we want to get from Tamale to Accra. Is there anything else on this value chain that you think would be a useful element that would actually make the value chain better in terms of carrying this box from Tamale to Accra? Can any of you think of another addition that we might add to this value chain that would make it better? Okay, maybe that's a rhetorical question. You're welcome to put your messages, your answers in chat. I will suggest the following. I will suggest this. I'm sure some of you have seen that. It's a rack, right? So if we have a rack, we can actually put our vegetables on here, tie them down, and that'll make the value chain better for us. Okay. So what do we have here? We have parts in a value chain. A value chain is made up of many parts, depending on how long it is. Obviously, short value chains have less parts, longer value chains have more parts. But anyway, a value chain is a collection of parts that are independent of each other, yet are dependent on each other in order to work, for the entire chain to work smoothly, in order to get the commodity from A to B with quality and in quantity intact, right? So for this particular value chain, these are the elements that are going to make it a good one. If they all work, if all these elements that we have on this particular bicycle work, then it will be a good value chain for helping us get our product from Tamale to Accra. So a breakdown. So if any of these parts, you can imagine, if the spokes were broken or the tires were flat or the rack cracked or the brakes didn't work, they would have an effect on the entire chain. We wouldn't be able to go as smoothly as we would like from Tamale to Accra if any of those parts broke. So this is one of the dynamics of value chains, which is extremely important to understand and remember. There are a number of actors who are independent yet dependent on each other, and they need to work together in order for everything to work smoothly. Okay. Let that sink in for a second and continue. Another way to look at this, now you're going to laugh, but some of you who may be mathematically inclined, there's a way to do it. I'm just going to, just for fun, I'm going to show you a value chain represented mathematically. So here is a formula. Because the elements on a value chain, they are dependent on each other, they need to work together, we have to use multiplication. Because in mathematics, multiplication shows dependency, whereas plus and minus, it does not show dependency. So in mathematics, if we take a series of ones and we all multiply them together, what are we going to get for an answer? I think we all know we're going to get 1, right? But if in a mathematical equation, no matter how long it is, of ones multiplied by each other, somewhere along the line there is a zero. In other words, in value chain speak, it would say one of the elements of the value chain fails to do its duty and function properly. What will happen to the entire value chain? Well, we may end up getting a zero in that value chain, because this equation, no matter how many ones you have in it, if there's a zero anywhere, the whole equation goes to zero. So again, this is just to underline the fact that all the actors of the value chain are dependent and connected like a mathematical formula. So if one link is weak or broken, the whole chain can be disrupted, if not stopped. Again, extremely critical to remember as we go forward to talk about later value chain finance. Value chains, this is the nature and dynamics of a value chain. Okay. So there we go. Yes, your zero is here and we didn't see it coming, so we have a problem. Right. Now, not all value chains are the same. I mentioned earlier, some are long, some are short. And that's also a very important element of in considering value chains and understanding value chains. Some are long and some are short, some are medium, some are complex, and some are more simple. All right. So for example, here is an example of a short, simple value chain. We all recognize this is the old Honda 100, which used to be prevalent everywhere. Now they've been replaced by Chinese machines. This is as a motor vehicle, it is relatively simple, and you can be considered like a short value chain because the parts are all sort of exposed. They're easy to fix, and they're easy to replace, and so this is a relatively simple and short value chain. It has less moving parts, which means less pressure points, which means less potential for breakdown and risk. So shorter value chains have less moving parts, which means they have less potential for risk. Now, some value chains are longer and more complex, and they may look like this. Okay. Obviously, a chain like this is more complex and longer, and they have more moving parts. It's much more complicated to fix. And it requires a higher level of maintenance in order to make it work. However, value chains like this, if they exist, have been usually built up over a long period of time, and they generally work well. If they're already at this stage of development and they look more like a supercar than a simple motorcycle, they are usually more developed and have functions which have been developed and practiced over time. So can you think of any value chains which might be more like this car than the motorcycle? Okay, I'll give you an example. I'll show you a picture of it here. This is actually, I bought this a few days ago, and I have the package here. This is in Polish, because I'm from Poland. So the word cacao in English is cocoa. And this is cocoa powder from, I don't know if you can see here, in Polish, it says Ghana. Sorry. But of course, Ghana in Polish has a Y at the end of it when we use it in a sentence. So this says this is dark cocoa from Ghana, and this is available on the shelves in our shops here in Poland. So this value chain, you can imagine, is quite long. Here's the cocoa is inside a plastic bag inside a box. Okay, now some value chains are not what we would like them to be, and I also have worked with value chains in my life that have looked more like this. So there are parts of value chain which are not functioning as well as we'd hope. They've been damaged, or they are dysfunctional, right? Some value chains even look like this, which means they don't really work well at all, and they're not able to get the product very far. and they're missing out on a lot of market opportunities. So basically, what's happening in these value changes is that there are dysfunctional issues that plague them, and very often what I have found is that these dysfunctional issues are not necessarily related to finance. The finance obviously is not coming because the financial institutions take one look at this value chain and say, sorry, there are too many non-financial problems in this value chain for us to put our money in it. It's too risky. In fact, there are many chains actually who are actually well functioning, where many institutions do not finance because they don't understand how to analyze the value chain to determine if it is functioning properly or not. But there are chains who are basically not functioning very well, and where putting money into them is not advised. Okay, very often the non-financial issues related to these chains are technological, logistical, but primarily they are relationship or market failure problems. So very often there are the relationships between the actors in the chain are weak. There is very little trust, and sometimes the markets for the logistics in the value chain are not able to get the commodity to the right markets. So there ends up becoming less and less interest in production, and the commodity ends up going somewhere else, exported and being imported. So anyway, there can also be rules, regulations, laws, and standards and norms that can be applied that are required for certain value chains and commodities to reach specific markets, which, if they are not abided by, will create a value chain which is not capable of arriving to where it needs to be. Again, I would like to remind all of you, if you have any questions as we are going along, we will have a short Q&A at the end of the presentation. But really, if you have any questions as we go through these slides, please, I encourage you to write them in the chat box, and we will respond to them. Okay. Right. So, can you think? Yes, Eric.
Eric here. I think the chat box is still quiet with no questions coming up for now. But I want you to shed light on this. Certainly, there is a difference between ag finance and agricultural value chain financing, which you earlier on stated. But I would like you to state the specific differences, if you can, for participants to know the specifics when it comes to the difference between ag finance and agricultural value chain financing.
Okay, thank you, Eric. That's a fair question. I'm going to get to that in a few slides, but if you think it's relevant at this point, I have no problem sharing it at this point, because maybe this is what we need to understand before we go forward. Okay, and then I'll come back to the train of thoughts. Okay, so let me go. How do I take this? Okay, let's be blunt about it. Yeah, let's be blunt about it. Right? What is the difference between ag finance and ag value chain finance? Okay, what's the difference? This is the question you're asking. Is that correct?
Yeah, John.
Yes. Okay.
Exactly so.
Let me tell you the difference between ag financing and ag value chain finance, because you're absolutely right. This is an area where there tends to be a lot of misunderstanding. Okay.
Sure.
when people hear the word ag finance, usually what they are thinking about is this: how to finance the production level. Basically, how to finance agricultural production, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, you are right.
Okay. So this is what in the most people's minds, when we say ag finance, do you have an ag finance manual? What is your ag finance policy? This is what we think about. We think about products and services that we can use that can help us to lend to agricultural producers. Fine, that's ag finance. I'm talking about value chain finance. And ag value chain finance is not a how-to, it's not a product. It is a risk mitigation approach. And it's a framework. In other words, it's a framework in which the entire value chain is holistically taken into account in the analysis before finance is provided. So it is not a product, or it is not, and it's not a set of products. It's a very different animal. Ag finance is usually turning around the concept of what kind of products can we use to finance agriculture and minimize risk. Ag value chain finance is an approach, it's a framework for applying finance throughout, no matter where you are financing in the chain. The concept is important because ag finance is concerned with how to finance the production level of the chain. So it is a subset of ag value chain finance. It's a part of it. Okay.
John, let me come in again concerning the question I raised. Now, if a financial institution decides to finance the purchase of, let's say, tricycle, which will be used to convey produce from the farmland to farm gate to the market, what would you term this loan, the name of this facility by the financial institution? Because if I clearly understand how to finance the production, ag finance is to finance the production level. That's the product. So that has to do with the crop production up to when the yield comes out. Usually, or the produce comes out. So how would you term the financing of a tricycle to convey the produce from the farm gate to the market?
Right. So this is a different level in the value chain. This is, well, it depends who you're financing the tricycle for. Are you financing it for the farmer or for a trader who wants to buy the product at the farm gate and take it to another market?
John, it can be both ways. And in addition, it can also be a transporter who the bank is finance or the financial institution wants to finance. So sure, that transport owner is an independent body from the farmer who has cultivated the produce. So it can be both ways.
Yeah. But nevertheless, the tricycle is part of the chain, the value chain. It's just a different, it's a different activity, but it's part of the chain from getting the product from A to Z, right? So I don't quite understand your question. What do you mean? How do you
so so can we term that kind of finance ag finance by the FI? That's all that I want to find out.
Look, for me, what I want to arrive at, okay, if you look here at this section here, ag value chain finance is basically all the actors. It means all the actors are linked together in a chain, which means all the risks are linked. Okay, so if you really want to ask me personally, the term ag finance to me means nothing.
Okay.
Okay, because
I got it now.
Yeah, it really means nothing, because if you're financing production, you are financing a value chain, one part of it. All right, but nevertheless, it is a chain of actors, and events and processes that are required to get that product from production to somewhere else. The production of an agricultural product is not an end in itself, right? It's not an end in itself. It's for a particular reason. It's produced to go to a market, you know, unless we're talking about what do you call it? Farmers who only produce for their own consumption. Then the ag production is an end in itself for their own consumption. But if the production is trying to reach a market for the financial benefit of the producer, then it is in a chain. And it doesn't matter whether you are financing production, or you are financing off-taking, or you are financing processing, or you are financing retail shops that are or wholesalers. They are all in a chain, which is part of the ag value chain finance. So if we like to say ag finance is production finance, fine. I have no problem with that, but to me it really doesn't mean anything, because if you are financing anyone in the ag sector, you are financing a chain, part of the chain. So you need to be aware of how that chain operates. So it's
John, thank you for the.
Okay, I hope that made sense. But if we go back to some of the, if we go through the slides a bit, maybe this will become make more sense. So let's start with, are you financing agriculture? Okay, let's see if you are financing agriculture. So do you have any clients that look like this? Here's a lady obviously selling vegetables. Vegetables are grown in fields, right? But she's not a producer necessarily. This lady is a trader, right? But what her products that she's selling are completely based in agriculture, right? What about this? Do you have any clients that look like this? All right, here's fish grilling. This lady may not be catching the fish, but she's grilling it and selling it later. Okay. Do you have any clients who look like this? This is also not production. This is milling of some sort, right? There may be a wholesaler or a miller that is being financed who has this. This is also in the value chain of agriculture. What about a client who looks like this? This is juice made from some kind of fruit or vegetable. This is also in the ag value chain, not production, but it is in the chain, but it is, you know, it is there. So if you are financing anybody that looks like any of this, right, you are financing, you are financing the ag vet, what I call the ag vet value chain, which is ag and animal product value chain. Okay, Kojo, I got your message. The sound is not clear. I'm afraid that could be sometimes a dip in the internet transmission. So I'm sorry for that. Okay, so basically my point here is you can run, but you can't hide. Okay, we have a value chain. You may be financing the clients that are here, just for as an example. Your clients are not producers. You are a financial institution that basically is financing in urban areas, and you're financing primarily retailers and maybe some wholesalers. Okay, that maybe is where you are right now. But those clients, what about this level? The actors that are supplying those clients are also linked to your clients. They are also part of a chain that is linked to your clients, and without them, if anybody at this level of the chain has a problem, your clients will subsequently potentially have a problem. But these clients here, what about the actors which are here, the producers in this instance? Without the producers, the collection, the off-takers or the aggregators wouldn't have anything to do if the producers have a problem, right? If there's a problem at producer level, then the aggregators will have a problem, and later down the road, the retailers and wholesalers will have a problem. And even before the producers, there are feed companies. In this particular case, we're looking at the egg value chain. There are feed companies and chick suppliers who are also in the chain, who are also linked ultimately to your clients, if your clients are up here in red, circled in red. If anything goes wrong at this level of the chain, it will impact this level of the chain, which will then impact this level of the chain, which will then impact this level of the chain where you're financing. Okay, so in essence, if you are financing a value chain, all right, it's not just production, but it is it's a chain of actors which are linked to each other and depend on each other, which means that the risks are also linked. And if there is a problem somewhere along the chain and that problem is serious enough, it will have repercussions throughout the chain. So is it clear that your question about if we are financing here a tricycle, okay, where does it fit? Is it ag finance? Is ag finance a tricycle? Well, in my opinion, anywhere you finance along a value chain in agriculture is ag finance. It doesn't mean you finance just production, but you are financing the chain that belongs to agriculture. That's my interpretation, but it's not important if we decide to say that ag finance is production finance and everything else is not production finance, if you like. But if you really want to take in the approach that all these levels in the chain are linked together and they're all part of the agricultural value of an agricultural value chain, for me, this is ag finance. But it's just a matter of semantics and convention. Okay. Okay. So if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck. In other words, if you're financing somebody who looks like this somewhere, who looks at least one of these, you're in the value chain of ag and you can't escape it. Okay. So let's do a little exercise. Okay. And for this, guys, please use your chat box. Okay. Let's see if you've learned anything. This is my way to test if my message has gotten through. There's a multiple, I'm going to show you a multiple, what do you call it? Multiple answer, multiple choice, sorry, question. And in the chat box, please just put A, B, C, or D for your answer. Let's look at the potential. So I would define value chain financing as providing finance to a business in a value chain. So if you think that's the best definition for value chain financing, please type A in the chat box. B is a set of financing. That value chain financing is a set of financing products, specially designed for actors in a value chain. Is that the best definition for value chain financing? A set of specially designed products for actors in the value chain. C says that a value chain financing is an approach or framework to financing that is based on analyzing the entire value chain before providing finance. So either A, B, or C can be your answer, or D, all of those three, A, B, and C, together formulate the best answer for value chain financing, or none of them. None of them, in your opinion, is a good definition of value chain finance. So in the chat box, I'd like you, if you have a few seconds, to type A, B, C, D, or E, and let's see what someone says. Okay, we have one D, one vote for D, one vote for C. Come on, guys, you got to vote. Everybody has to vote. There are not that many of you, so it can't be that complicated. 14 people, we should have 14 votes. If you have access to the chat box, please click the chat box at the bottom of the screen And let's see what you think. So far, we have one D and one C. Doesn't look like we're going to get very far. Two C's. Okay, Binyam. Binyam, yeah, okay. The good, that's C. Two C's. Any more C's? Any more answers? Nobody answers. Another C from Christopher. Okay. Chat box is at the bottom, should be at the bottom of your screen. It says chat. Just click on that and type in it. Okay, it looks like we're getting all C's. Good. Good. Okay. I have just about half an hour left, so more C's. Good. Okay, I think you've got it. You're right. A, it's not the right answer. B is also not the best answer in terms of defining a value chain. So that means it cannot be D. It is C. It is C, exactly, as you mentioned. Because if you remember, it is value chain financing is actually an approach and methodology. It's not products. If you remember the bicycle example that we had, that we showed in the bicycle example, if the brakes work but the tires are flat, we don't really have a good value chain. So this is the whole idea here, is that value chain financing is an approach that encompasses the entire chain, that you analyze it before you begin to finance it. Okay. And just as a note, a financial product is just that. It's a financial product. It's a tool. It is not value chain finance. Value chain finance is an approach. It's an approach and a framework and a methodology. Okay. So this brings us to the next screen, which we already saw. I think now the message has gone through. And so this is what we're looking at. But I want to share with you the fact that it is a risk mitigation approach and framework. So even though it is not a product that you can apply to a set of clients in a chain, the approach is such that it will allow you to figure out what products are the best for any level in the value chain, and help you make sure that you are able to minimize your risks before you lend to the chain. Okay, so think about it like this. Basically, you have to think like a detective and a doctor. Okay, doctors and detectives, what do? They diagnose. And then they try to figure out what is the problem to find a cure, right? And detectives do the same thing. When there's a problem, they try to investigate, determine what went wrong, or who did it, and then try to uncover the cause and the root of the problem. So in value chain financing, the key skills and the key approach is based on investigating and diagnosing the illnesses, if you like, in the chain. Where are the potential problems? Where are the potential weaknesses? And what may be the causes, and where in the chain are those problems located? Where may they happen? So even though we may only be financing one part of the chain, somewhere here near the end, somewhere downstream, far downstream from production, we are still, our clients are going to be impacted by things that happen in other areas in the chain, down upstream from them. Remember, upstream is going back towards the source, downstream is going away from the source of production. So finding out where problems and weaknesses lie, and what the causes of those problems are, can start to give us a better picture of the risk profile of our clients. What are the potential problems that may occur if we finance them, and are there ways for us to minimize the eventuality that those problems actually occur? Okay, so the second rule about value chain financing is that being aware of what could happen or what is not working is more than half the cure. Okay, Eric, I got your message. Thank you. 10 more minutes. That's going to be tough. And
Of
again,
course, we can, depending on how it goes, maybe some 5 more minutes will do. So don't worry too much.
okay, I think we started at 2 and to 3. Yes, 2 to 3:30. Right. Okay, so I'll try to go a little.
Carry on. But that has to do with only your presentation.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
that's
if there are questions,
yeah. That's fine with me. It's up to the participants.
But some 5 minutes is allowable. Don't worry.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again, a tip that I mentioned earlier is that not all the chain illnesses can be cured with finance. Okay, so there are non-financial issues that sometimes need to be taken into consideration. So, in summary, again, very simply, the idea in value chain finance is to know how things are working here and here and here and here. Even if you're only financing here or only financing here or only financing down here, knowing what's going on and how things are working throughout the chain is what's important. So in summary, value chain finance is a diagnostic approach to expose the risks. Okay, it is a big part of risk management mitigation. Implementing it can be time-consuming and complex, at least at first, but it gets easier over time. But it certainly has a huge potential for contributing to reducing the overall risk of your institution, no matter where you are lending in the chain. Once, of course, that you realize that you are lending to actors who are in an agricultural value chain. All right, because that's the first step, is to make sure that to check whether the clients that you are lending to are actually in a chain, and how deep are they in that chain, and how dependent are they on that agricultural chain. But basically, all economic activities, whether they are in agriculture or not, are part of a value chain. Even plastic bags, mineral products, they're all part of some kind of chain. If there are actors, multiple actors who are moving something from A to B to C to D and adding value along the way, they are all in a value chain. There's no exception and there's almost no escape. So therefore, not implementing a value chain finance approach is sort of, to me, like financing blindfolded. You know, you're not seeing the whole picture. So things can happen that you did not anticipate, did not even consider was even possible, and you find yourself in a real problem. So even if you're only financing one level of the chain, knowing how the whole thing works, how it's structured, what the relationships, what the potential bottlenecks are, and the motivations between the actors will help you to find mitigating strategies. That's the bottom line for value chain financing. So very quickly, how do we do this? Okay, obviously we can't get into detail on how this is done. As I mentioned earlier, you need to basically map the chain. Mapping the chain requires understanding what the issues are, what the support mechanisms are, if any, and what are the financing or technical assistance gaps that may exist at all the points along a chain, including what are the issues that may even be related to consumer demand. So demand profiles. Don't forget that this is the pull. The ultimate pull of the chain is the consumers. If the consumers change their habits drastically, then there might be a drop in demand for the particular product. So even here, so the idea here is to know your client. So is my client, number one, in an agriculture? Is my client in and dependent upon an agricultural value chain? If so, which one is it? And then map it. Map that chain, have someone map the chain and to identify the issues and the gaps at each of the levels in the chain. And I will later on show you an example of what this can look like. But basically, a value chain map is usually better done by somebody who really knows how to do it, because it can take a lot of time to collect the correct kind of information necessary for that. So it's usually yes. Gamif, basically, value chain maps should be done by somebody who really knows how to do one. When I do my work, I usually always hire an agronomist or an agroeconomist who from the country in which I'm working, who knows the country, who knows the value chains in the country, knows where to look for information. Because sometimes because you very often have to get it from multiple sources in the country. So outsourcing this task is usually the best thing to do. It saves a lot of time, especially since normally in financial institutions, nobody on staff really has the expertise required to do this. And I will show you a value chain map so that you can appreciate what it looks like, and then you can decide yourself. Right. Unfortunately, value chains are not just this part. Yeah. It's not just here that we have been looking at so far. The maps, the pictures I was showing you was only showing you basically this part, the value chain actors themselves. Value chains are composed, also have support services, which are external, and there are also different financial institutions which act upon the chain, and they finance different areas, okay? They finance different parts. So, so in a value chain mapping, these other outside peripheral areas are also mapped and included because they're extremely important, okay? Because every chain, every value chain actors have supports, sometimes have support and are financed by different organizations, and you need to know who's doing what. Because the linkages and the partnerships are needed in order to strengthen the chain, and that helps to reduce the risks for overall of the chain. So knowing who in the value chain is receiving support services and what kind of support services they are receiving, who in the value chain is being financed and who is not, is also important. And building relationships, not only horizontally and vertically, but crosswise, crossover relationships, is part of value chain finance. It's also a very important part of value chain finance is creating these relationships and knowing what's going on throughout, not just the main part of the value chain, but the actions and reactions that are happening with the financial services and the support services that are acting upon that chain. And a good value chain map will include information about all that. Okay. All right, so now we've gotten to the point where we can do a poll and have a look at an example of a value chain map. Now I've created a value chain map cafe with a menu. Yes, please, Eric, go ahead.
Let me interject small. We have some few questions coming in. I would like you to address.
Okay.
Them before.
Go ahead.
Proceed. So, whether they need a specialist to assist to identify the chains. So that's the first question. Then the second question, an FI provides loans to clients without recourse to looking at the activity connects of the business clients. So what do they have to do to start applying a value chain in their proceed?
Okay, thank you. The answer to question one, I hope I answered it before, is yes. A value chain map should be outsourced to a specialist. Good. Until you get the skills internally to do it yourself. But it can be quite complex, and it's a time-consuming effort. Whereas if you give it to somebody who knows about it and how to do it, a value chain map can be done within a matter of days. Okay, so my recommendation is that you outsource it unless you have people inside your organization who know how to do it. And the answer to the second question is that was about yes. Exactly.
Should I go
So,
over the question?
yeah, I'm going to get to that, but basically the short answer to that is, in order to begin applying the value chain in your business operations, you need to reclassify your current clients by type of activity, not by economic sector. So petty trade, classifying clients by petty trade or manufacturing, or I don't know what, even off-taking, wholesaling, retailing. These classifications do not tell you what value chain they are. They may be linked to and dependent on. So you need to be able to go into your database and see exactly what are the specific commodities that your clients are primarily dealing in, if they are ag-based. So it requires looking into your portfolio to determine where your clients actually are, and are they actually in value chain, ag value chains or not, and then which ones, and then you can begin to map. If I'll get to that. If the concentration of your portfolio is significant enough to validate using the value chain approach to map a value chain. So if you have very few clients in a particular value chain and the portfolio at risk for those clients is very low, then there's no reason to go through the exercise of a value chain map.
Thank you, John.
Okay, so I will set up a poll just very quickly. If anybody wants to see a particular value chain, I have the breakfast menu, the main courses, the side dishes, and the dessert. So we have an egg value chain, a milk, cheese, and yogurt value chain, which is called dairy. We have beef, pork, chicken, maize, tomato, avocado, and strawberry. And I'm going to launch now a poll, which you should be able to see on your screens, where you can please just pick one dish that you would like to see, and I will bring it up and just quickly go through a value chain map, which in my opinion is very well done. Unfortunately, it is done for Rwanda, where I'm also currently working and have been working for many years. But it's a very good example of how a value chain mapping should be done, to give you an idea of how it should look. So does everybody see the poll? Did it come up?
Yeah, John, it's up.
Okay, so we'll give a few
Confirm it's
minutes.
up.
We'll give a few minutes here on that, and then I will give some very specific information on how to look at value chain implementation, value chain financing implementation, because it's actually based on levels of implementation, and the more capacity you have, the more levels you can implement, but you need to decide what makes sense for you. Okay, it looks to me so far that the egg value, avocado value chain is high on the list. Strawberry is fighting. And we're fighting. Only 4 of 17 people have voted. Keep voting. Egg value chain and dairy value chain are neck and neck, along with the maize value chain and the tomato and avocado value chain. Wow, and the strawberry value chain. So 25% only have answered. Okay, some of us cannot vote, so I won't get 17 responses. That's fine. Okay. Okay, I need, okay, the poll has ended. Do I end the poll? Does anybody, guys, my support team, is there an answer? Is there a clear winner here? I don't see the answer. I don't see the winner. I don't see the results. So I'm afraid. Okay. All right. The egg value chain, guys. We saw it. We saw it along the. Maybe I'll show something. So I guess I'm going to choose. I'm going to choose something. Okay. There, if you like the egg value chain, how about? Let's see. What did we get? Eggs got high value. Maize doesn't really matter. They're all relatively the same in terms of structure. Okay, let's do the dairy one is interesting because it's quite complex. Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's do the dairy one because there are pictures of cows and it's nice to see cows, you know, sometimes. So I will share now this screen. Okay, do we have the Rwanda dairy value chain on screen? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Now, so this is the Rwanda dairy chain. The first thing we have here is a text box, which basically shows some of the main highlights of the result of the analysis of the chain. And then we have some history here, and then it goes into the production data. So for the last 5-6 years, what the production has been in terms of cattle and milk production. Now it's divided by province, and it's explained basically how milk is produced and where. This is a picture of the country in the regions where mostly most of the production of milk occurs. And then we're talking about the milk production zones. So there's the Kigali one, the Eastern Milk Shed, and how they work and how they are how they are operated. And then we have the milk market analysis. So we learn here that milk is primarily consumed domestically, but there are some exports, but the exports, as you can see here, have been decreasing over time. Importation has also been decreasing over time, which means that the milk production in the country is feeding the population primarily. And then we actually have then the map, the picture of the actors and the actors in the chain, and here on this side a description of how these actors work together and interact, and how these different actors what their role is basically in the chain and how they operate. The transporters, the processors, the milk retailers, the food stores, and even an analysis of the consumer demand. And then we have here an analysis of the market failures and the challenges in the entire chain. So there are challenges related to the farm gate price, the milk production seasonality, the underutilization of dairy processing factories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here we talk about some policies, support policies, government policies, NGO policies, projects that might be relevant to the sector, that are trying to improve the sector. This is information that we need to know. Here then is an idea of what might be some of the financing and market opportunities chain. And then here is a list of some of the de-risking mechanisms which currently exist that could be leveraged if you're lending to the chain. Okay. And then here at the end here, there's a list of potential dairy value chain actors or anchors, as we call them. These are leaders in the chain. In this case, these are milk and cheese and yogurt producers. Their current installed capacity and used capacity and the total utilization rate. So this information then can be used to design, at least for us to be aware of how the chain is operating, what are the weak links in it, what are the problems, the struggles that the chain is having to try to develop and become better, who is doing what in the chain, how are they doing it with each other, and what are some of the support mechanisms and de-risking mechanisms that could be leveraged if we are going to finance actors, or if we are financing actors in this chain. Okay. Okay, I will now quickly go back to sharing the chain. Thank you for your votes. Okay, so in value chain lending, I'm going to wrap up very quickly here. Value chain lending, there are basically four levels. Level 0 is basically forget about it. Let's just continue doing as we're doing it. We don't need to know what our clients are involved in because it's not important. Their exposure to agricultural value chains is limited, if not zero. So we don't have to worry about it at all, and that would be called blindfold finance. The second level, okay. Thank you for that. The second level would be is level that I call being aware. So if you don't have the capacity to implement value chain financing to a very higher level degree, at least you should be aware. So you should have at least an idea of your clients and be able to classify them by risk profile, for basically by a value chain that they are involved in. So start with what you have. Start simply by analyzing your current portfolio and try to segregate your clients by value chain rather than by economic type or loan type. To get an idea of where they are, and then if there is a significant amount of concentration of your clients in any particular value chain, you may want to know how that chain works. So you may have a value chain map done on that client's chain. Okay, and then you can, once you have a map, it will be very easy for you to diagnose some of the root causes and weaknesses of the chain, where they come from and why they are. And that will help you come up with mitigation strategies, things that you can do to try to potentially avoid having those potential weaknesses affect your clients. Okay, level 2 is about going a step further and trying to coordinate and partner with the other institutions and organizations which are trying to support the value chain. So you do that by building relationships with other support organizations. If you remember the value chain ecosystem, on one side, there are lots of different kinds of support organizations. Some of them are governmental, some of them are non-governmental, some of them are private, but they're all trying to assist a particular value chain in improving itself. It's good to have relationships with those organizations because they have insights in the value chain that you may not have, and they are trying to fix some of the problems in the chain. So it's good to know what they're trying to do and where they're trying to do it and with whom they're trying to do it. And then you can go a step further and cultivate relationships with other financial institutions in the chain, because none of us finance the entire chain. None of us can finance the entire chain. So there are other financial institutions in the chain who are financing the chain, and it's good to try to cooperate with them rather than compete, and try to have a common understanding and strategy of financing the chain, pulling together to make it work for everybody in the chain. Level 3 is a level that most of you will not be able to go into. This is really mostly for banks and larger financial institutions. It includes creating multi-actor financing facility packages, in which basically the way you do it is you actually have a strategy of developing a particular chain, and you will finance 4, 5, 6 different actors in the chain in order to improve the chain simultaneously and avoid creating what we call unbalancing the chain. But we won't go into that. So basically, step 1 is isolate the illness, find out if there are actors in value chains that are in your portfolio, and then map them and investigate them, diagnose the causes, and try to mitigate. Yeah, again, be the doctor, be the detective, and then apply level 1, 2, or 3 according to your actual capacity and need. Okay, so is it for me? What is it? Why do value chain financing? Basically, ag is a high-risk sector, so if you're in it, the more you know, the better. Doing ag financing approach will help you to know the true concentration risk and PAR by value chain, so you really have a better understanding of where your risks really lie. And it will help you to focus your mitigation strategies and leverage the appropriate mechanisms. And then finally, it may help you to formulate proactive portfolio concentration risk strategies. So that's the why it may be valuable and worthwhile to undertake this approach. And which level to adopt, 0, 1, 2, or 3, well, that's going to be dependent on how deep in value chains are you. So do a portfolio analysis in terms of identifying its concentration in ag. Are you in ag? How deep are you in ag? Is your ag portfolio PAR high? And are the value chains in your ag portfolio, are they very long or very short? I mean, if you look here at this lady who's doing fish, her value chain might be very, very short. She buys fish from a fisherman on the coast down the street, cooks them here and sells them to people who walk by. She's got a very short value chain. The value chain here and the value chain here, and even the value chain here, is much longer. So value chain length is also an important factor. If it's not very long, it might not be, there might not be much you can do. Also, determining which level of the value chain to implement, it depends on what are your growth ambitions. Are you planning to become a larger institution? If so, the more you can, the more parts of the value chain method you can apply, the better. And what are your internal skills and capacity? Do you have to beef them up? And how much financial muscle do you have? Because applying level 3 requires quite a lot of financial muscle. So these were the objectives initially that we tried to achieve: a common understanding of the difference of what is ag finance as opposed to ag value chain finance, help you determine whether you are actually lending to the ag sector and how to figure that out, and then give you a better idea of what ag finance is all about, and a little idea of how to implement it. And is it basically something for you? So I'm sorry that we went way over time. We started very late. And I will now hand over. The floor to Edmund to close out. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, John and Eric, for a very wonderful presentation and time. I have always had a difference between what is ag financing and value chain financing and all that, but you took your time to be able to explain that for us. And I believe that our audience too have had the opportunity to get a deeper understanding in a way. But that is not enough. We have not finished. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We want to do more on this particular activity next week. And for that matter, what we want to do is that next week, Tuesday, on the 8th of February, we want to have a discussion with the savings and loans at 1 p.m. At the same time, we also want to have on the, yes, I believe it's showing on your screen, on the 9th, we want to have discussion with rural banks alone, because we want to bring the information down to our level and be able to see how best we can take advantage in our respective business operations. And then on the 10th of February, we want to also have a section, a 1-hour section, also with the microfinance institution and other institutions. Participant, one of the things that I would say is that we were supposed to have some of our people on, but maybe they couldn't get on. Please, let's inform them that we want to do a specialized activity for each of them. So let's get our other colleagues to be able to come on in the various days that we've agreed for that important information or discussion that we want to have. So on this note, we want to say thank you so much for joining us for this wonderful program. We hope to see you next week in the days that we've all agreed to be able to have a very wonderful discussion as we are. But also, let's not forget, coming up also on the 24th of February is something that is going to be very important for our businesses. We're going to have a very wonderful, presentation on emotional intelligence, which is also something which also having something to do with our businesses. On the 17th, we're going to have that training in Accra. If you have not yet booked a seat, try and book a seat. If you're also in Kumasi or let's say the BA or any other place, you can join us also in Kumasi on the 24th of February. Full day. It's a face-to-face program. In these programs in Accra, we're going to have it at Sun Lodge Hotel. Please make sure you register at Tesano. It's only a slot for just 30 people. So come fast and then you'll be counted part. You will enjoy the section so much. Kumasi, we are going to have it at a True Vine Hotel. And please join, and then let's have these wonderful days of knowledge sharing and skills that was going to enhance our business operation. So you'll soon be receiving, before I go off, you'll soon be receiving information about the cyber security workshop on the 16th and then 23rd of March, so that you can be able to know what time and what place that we are having this program. I want to say thank you once again. And with that, we'll be closing this webinar. I wish you all the best and bye-bye.
Thank you, Edmund. Just 1 second on the webinars for 8, 9, and 10 February, it will be ag. It will be the obstacles, how to overcome the obstacles of implementing ag value chain finance.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So grateful.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. All the best. Bye.
Thank you.